check. Testing. Okay. It's a bit delayed coming through there, but I think it should be live. Let me know if you guys see it. Ah, there we are. All right.
We live?
We're live.
Nice.
Great.
Hello, YouTube.
Yeah, hello, viewer.
Hey, guys.
Hey.
There we go.
Okay.
It's weird. Yeah, I can see the delay. Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is good. Okay, so welcome to our, hopefully we got some viewers. Just looking at it here, I don't have enough screens to see everything, so I'm actually using my cell phone to see what's going on.
Yeah, I see 22 right now.
All right. All right, so glad we could have a few viewers here. So yeah, guys, thanks for showing up. Thanks for agreeing to do this with me. So I have two visitors here, two people that I'm quite familiar with, chat with quite a bit. So Stephen Wright. Stephen is the owner of Supafly FPV frames, the flip mode. What's the other frame
Which
you
you have?
Exactly.
Juice mode.
Exactly.
Two flip mode?
I have two flip modes, exactly. Great frames. And we also have one of the Betaflight developers. This is Jan Post from, you guys are both in, well, sort of close time zones. So Stephen is in the UK and Jan is in south of Germany.
In Germany.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Jan is responsible for a lot of the new Betaflight filter stuff in Betaflight 4.3. So
yeah, two to be exact, two important parts.
Right, exactly. Yeah, yeah. So one of the new things, both of them are built around the notch filters, right? So one of the new things that you
right.
were really involved in is the new dynamic notch system, and as well the new what's called the RPM crossfade thing. So a lot of this stuff is still kind of elusive to a lot of people. And
yeah,
that's partly why I wanted to have you guys on here. And of course, Stephen and I have been talking for it must be a couple of years or so now, and we talk
2 or 3.
We talk quite regularly about flight performance and propwash and all of those things and how to optimize that. So Stephen has a lot of experience in the field with this kind of thing. So we have some agreements and some disagreements on what's good, what's bad, and we're always bickering about stuff.
What's the disagreements?
Oh, we can get into that later. No worries about that.
Intriguing.
So I'm not paying too much attention to the chat. We need some extra hands here, but I didn't expect to see so many people.
I might put it on my phone and then see if I can get. Yeah, I could maybe, because Jan's going to do quite a lot of talking now, isn't he? Going to do quite a lot of explaining.
Yeah.
At the beginning, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. So what I thought, I have a kind of rough outline about what I thought we'd do. So when I put out this post to try to see if anybody would be interested in seeing a live stream, I told some people to send some log files. So we actually have a few log files that we could analyze, but I thought we'd leave those till the end. Try to keep some people and we'll analyze those log files and give you our expert opinion on some things. So I think now, we should just start it off with Jan, I guess. Jan, and so we're doing this all in Zoom. I'm no expert yet in this whole area. So right now, what we're going to do is get Jan to share the screen, and we're going to talk a little bit about the new dynamic notch and the new RPM crossfade. Wonderful Betaflight stuff.
Yeah, okay. Let me share my screen real quick.
Yeah. So I'm gonna keep looking here, make sure. Yes, there's no notes of anybody saying they can't hear us, so that's got to be a good sign.
Yeah,
excellent.
Oh, this is
so this is a pretty cool little animation.
This is a real treat for the nerds.
Yeah, right. So So my first improvement is, well, I worked over 1 year of 1 year of development for the new dynamic notch, and so this is what you can see right here is a pseudo animation. It's not the real deal, but it's doing what the dynamic notch would actually do in your drone. So you can see the actual frequency components in blue.
So each of those
The blue
peaks
line.
are separate notch filters, finding those peaks in the noise, so to speak.
Exactly. So the triangles are the actual peaks that are being detected every step, and the notches are these dotted lines, and they are following the peaks. They have a low pass filter on them, so that's why they are lagging behind a little bit.
So what's different about this from the previous? Like what was didn't like the previous? Didn't we have like the possibility to have like at least 2 notches before? Like what was the difference from say 4.2 to this in terms of notches?
So in Betaflight 4.2, up until Betaflight 4.2, we had just the ability to have just 1 notch per axis. I think this is the roll axis right here. But anyway, so we just had 1 notch on an axis. So the new thing is that you can have up to 5 notches. I mean, we could have 10 notches per axis, but I mean, you have to set a limit somewhere. So I said, okay, 5 seems more than enough for most cases. So that's the one improvement. And the other big improvement for the dynamic notch is that we now have more resolution for the actual frequency. Well, the signal gets split up into different frequency compartments, and now that's twice as much as before. And but at the same time, it's quite fast. So
is there Jan, is there a sliding, because that's what the SDFT part of it is that's the kind of, is that the way the notches slide between the bins or something like that, so which is different from the FFT?
Sliding, the name sliding, that's because you have a window and the samples come in and they slide through the window. So you have a window that's moving with the samples. That's the sliding part of the sliding discrete Fourier transform. Yeah, so before it was a fast Fourier transform. The short term is FFT, and now it's an SDFT, sliding discrete Fourier transform. So it's a lot faster actually, and we can go into a little bit more detail why it's faster. But yeah, so basically we can now have more resolution while still the new dynamic notch can run on F411s, which are actually the slowest chips we are supporting in Betaflight. But it's still working on these slow.
I guess from the perspective of the user, the key thing there is that you can have multiple notches that are actually moving independently, right? So
yes, and it's not taking up many resources. So it was a big part of my work, trying to get the resources.
So in this plot, the blue curve is the noisy unfiltered data, right? And so that the orange is after you've applied the notches.
You can see the big noise peak from the motor, the first big peak, the blue one. And the orange one is the filtered one after the notches. Yeah.
And the good thing about it as well is, I mean, in the previous dynamic notch, we had the kind of 2 notches that were connected. So they made it wider and used 2, didn't they? But then with this one, because the reality is that resonances is generally the biggest problem after the motor noise. With this, you can use 2 or 3 notches and they will just find the resonance and then nail it.
Right. Yeah.
So
it
means
in 4.2, yeah, that's a good point. You could set the width in percent, apart. You can have two notches and set them apart by a bit, so that the notch, the combined notch, is a little bit thicker. It's a little bit wider, and but now that we have more resolution with the SDFT, it's actually it's tracking. It's very precise, and so we are rather tracking multiple peaks than just one, than just the biggest peak.
There was some talk. Sorry, go ahead.
There you go, Brian.
You go, Brian. That's basically the gist of it.
Yeah, I was just kind of curious because there was some talk at some point like that. So everybody probably have heard of the Q factor. The Q factor changes the width of the notch, right?
Right.
But there was some talk I've heard this. So is it true that when the notch goes to higher frequencies, that the width gets actually bigger? Not the Q factor, but the width of the actual notch.
Yes.
And so, yeah. Can you talk a bit about that? Because there was mention at some point that like you would keep the width the same. So a lot of people are probably in the misunderstanding.
In the beginning, right? In the beginning, I implemented it in a way that the notch stays the same width over all frequencies, and I did that by changing the Q factor. So if you as it is right now, and everyone knows it, we have just a constant Q value, and if you go up in frequency, the notch gets wider, even if the Q value stays the same. So,
what was the advantage or disadvantage? Like, why at the time? I think we thought so. A lot of this was motivated by the way we thought about notches too, right? And that's a large part of what happened was learning really what the notches were doing and how much filter delay that they can actually produce, right?
And so I tested the delay, and by trying to get the notch, let the notch stay at a constant width. If it went down low, it introduced quite some delay. Not much, but it was a little bit more delay than just keeping the Q value constant.
Yeah.
So that's why I discarded it.
There was something intuitive about the idea that the notch would have a certain width and it would stay there. So and that width. But I guess the idea is that it's not costing you much as it goes up into high frequencies anyway. So
and we are going to see that in a few other animations.
Right.
But so more on that later.
Another thing that I find interesting, Jan, is how does the kind of algorithm to detect the peaks work, and kind of how do you set it at the specific level?
Yeah. So what it boils down to is very simple. So I'm looking at the values of the blue line, and a peak is detected if the value on the left hand side and on the right hand side of the peak, if they are smaller. So that's it. And if they are smaller than the value in the middle, then the value in the middle is a peak. And that's what's doing in code.
That sounds simple, but I'm sure it's more complicated. So
I started with the analytical. I started with the a mathematical approach, and with taking the derivative equals 0 and solving for the x value. And if you simplify it again, and then you end up with, is the left hand side value smaller? Is the right hand side value smaller? Okay, peak.
So I just I just see a response here by Banny UK. Unpopular opinion: just the dynamic notch alone is better than RPM. I'll let you respond to that one, Jan. Or both of you guys could respond. It's an interesting point.
Well, maybe Jan's biased.
Yeah. Well,
so what is it?
Field is still Yeah.
Why do you think someone would say it's better?
The dynamic notch?
Yeah, I guess the point here that Banny is making is that just the new dynamic notch is better. I don't know. Better is a weird word.
I think that this is out there a little bit. Some people, I know that Mark did some testing. I mean, I think the fundamental, right. It shouldn't really be a battle of who's the best, because they've got different benefits, in my opinion, and the RPM filter tracks motor noise much better and deals with it. And
so for motor noise, it's RPM filter hands down best.
The other thing is, I think there's something creeping in, which is that people are trying the new dynamic notch without the RPM filters and thinking it's better just purely because there's less filters running. So it's just low latency, because even if you run all 5 dynamic notches, that's still a total of 15 because you've got the 3-axis 5.
Yeah.
Whereas the RPM filters, you've got 4 per motor, then per axis, and then you've got the harmonics. So you've got 12, right. And then per harmonic. So you've got tons of notches. So it's a small latency.
3 axis times 3 harmonics. That's 9 per motor, right?
4 motors, 3
4
axis,
motors times 3 times 3, exactly. Yeah. So I think there might be an argument to be made with respect to like the Cinelifter and the X8 guys. So the guys are running 8 motors, right? Because now you have 8 motors times 9 harmonics per motor, or 9 notches per motor. 72 total notches for RPM. So I often think that like this would be probably
in this case, the dynamic notch is probably more practical. Yeah. Okay, I agree.
Yeah. Or even
the freestyle or racer. No.
Yeah, exactly. Or it might be a case where, for example, RPM with 1 harmonic and then a couple of notch. Yeah. Yeah. It depends on how. Usually, what I look at is how strong those harmonics are, depending on.
Yeah. Right.
All right.
So
yeah, I don't know what else there is about the notch. I mean, the notches are really interesting. So one thing I wanted to point out is, I think a lot of times people think when you mention notches, and then you just talk about RPM versus dynamic notches versus, dare I say, the matrix filter, it's all still using the exact same code, right? It's the sort of base code. Now, I'm not sure, there might be some new stuff, especially with respect to what you've been doing, but I believe it's still based around that what's been labeled the biquad code or whatever, right?
Yes, and the structure of the dynamic notch is still the old one. In the basics, it's still the same, but nearly every line is rewritten. So
cool. Okay.
Yeah, but
we can always come back to more conversation around that if it's of interest. But I think the RPM stuff is what we want to get into now. I'd love to hear about the
speaking about
stuff.
the RPM. Yeah, exactly. So let's show you another graphic.
Which was like, what was it, like a year's worth of work on the SDFT and then a day's worth on the crossfading the RPM.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. Which is pretty funny.
So it's not a big piece of code, the crossfade, is it? Or is it?
Yeah, no, that's actually, it's very
just
simple, actually. The idea is extremely simple. And
but like the latency savings, it's crazy. So I know right away, like once people, the X8 guys, really interesting. So I've seen a lot of log files come in Betaflight 4.29 with the X8s, and just the estimated latency from PIDtoolbox in the range of 6 milliseconds, which is pretty darn large. And in certain frequencies, that's probably even a lot more. But as soon as they went to 4.3, it jumped down to about 2 to 3 estimated. So there's something big that happens here. Yeah.
Well, most of the latency is in the low frequencies, isn't it? So.
Latency of what? Sorry.
The RPM notches, it's like when they come into the lower frequencies.
Oh, yeah.
So that's why it takes such a big bite out of it when you do the crossfade.
Yeah, we're coming to that in a little bit. Yeah.
So what is this? What is this graphic here? I love these animations you have.
Yeah, right. So back when we Chris Thompson, CDZ Snooze, yeah, he's pretty well known in Betaflight, big personality, and he pointed out that we had these weird oscillations. He looked at black box logs, and we had these weird oscillations when on big stick movements. So first he thought it was the dynamic, it was caused by the dynamic notch, but then he switched it off, and these oscillations were still there. Then he switched off the RPM filter, and they were gone. So he shared this with us, these results, and because of my work for the dynamic notch, I already had an idea how we could maybe solve this problem. So
can I interject? So what you're saying is that, and this is how I understood it as well, that the notches essentially create a kind of anti-signal, an anti-sine wave, kind of like the best way the analogy I used is like your phase cancellation, noise cancellation headphones, where it just creates, it generates the actual opposite phase of the signal it sees, and then it uses that to cancel out the signal, because of course you have one signal that goes one way. If you have an anti-signal, it's just going to sum together to cancel it out. But then the problem arises when what?
The problem that arises,
with that idea.
Yeah, right. So
this ringing or something.
The problem was the notches were tracking the motor noise, and if you throttle down and the motor starts to rotate slower, the notch follows suit and tracks the motor noise. But then at 100 hertz, that's the default. The RPM notches, they cannot go below 100 hertz. They cannot go past that. But the motor noise, of course, I mean, motors can go slower until they stop. So actually the motor noise would go down, the notch would track, and at 100 hertz, the notch couldn't go any further, but the motor noise would go lower. But the notch, because it has this anti-signal, as you called it, it would still
ring.
Have this, it would ring, and it would be persistent in time. This ringing.
So it's as though the notch
take a little bit until it.
So it sees a signal it has to get rid of, but it takes time for it to build that anti-signal to cancel it. But then it also takes time to turn it off. And if the noise stops suddenly, it's still got a leftover sort of phase, right?
Exactly.
And then that phase, I presume, continues on for some period. And basically, to us, it looks like noise, or it looks like an oscillation.
Yes.
And
so in that case, the notch would make its own noise. Yeah, totally unnecessary.
Yeah. So that's still true for all of the notches, right? But it's inherently worse for the RPM, because they would come down and park at 100 hertz and then just kind of ring a bit.
For notches, if all four motors were below 100 hertz, the notches, 4 notches would stay at 100 hertz, and they would all ring together and ring like 12, crazy.
12 on
if the harmonics go below that as well, then it's even worse. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And the PID controller, I can show you this in another graphic. That's our PID controller in Betaflight. So you can see where the controller is most sensitive. That's around 100 hertz, around here, and the notches would ring at 100 hertz. So so it would be a lot of noise in the dterm. The dterm is the yellow line here. So this ringing of the RPM filter would explode, and you would see it in the D term. Yeah.
When you say it's the most sensitive at 100 hertz, what do you mean by I guess, sensitive. It has the most reactivity at that particular frequency or something.
Yeah, so the frequencies that are coming into the PID controller get amplified the most at around 100 hertz. I mean, it depends how you set up the low pass filters and all that kind of stuff, but it's around 50 to 200 hertz, let's say.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you can kind of see how small in the dotted or dashed line, you can see how these frequencies get amplified if they go into the PID controller. It's hard to think about it like that
D, right?
at first.
Yeah, it's mostly the D. The yellow line is mostly the D.
Yeah, exactly. If there was no low pass filter, D would actually shoot towards infinity. So the low pass filters is why it's actually going down again.
People get
for high frequencies. Probably. Yes, yeah. Exactly. So you could have the slightest amount of noise at 1,000 or 4,000 hertz, and if you don't have any filters, oh boy, you're gonna have a bad time.
Yeah. So what does the crossfade code do? The little piece of code.
Right.
What is it actually doing?
So actually, it's nothing special. It just turns the notch off. So before we had crossfading, the notches or any filter it couldn't be turned off. It would stay on all the time.
So is this the idea with this animation that somehow, so as the notch RPM comes down towards, then it starts to fade it out? I see.
So we have this value.
You guys don't see this, but
weight in the.
Sorry, you guys don't see this, but it's telling me we're running out of time in our Zoom chat.
Already?
So yeah, exactly. We got a few minutes, but I think what we'll end up doing is taking a little pause in about 2 or 3 minutes. I'll let you explain that, and then we're going to take a quick pause.
Right.
Just to remind you that.
Yeah. So we have this value k, which is actually called weight in the Betaflight code. But what it's doing is just if you have a weight of 1, you have the full notch attenuation, and if the weight is 0, the notch gets bypassed or crossfaded completely, and it's off basically. We bypass
like
the
slider.
Input. Yeah, like a DJ slider. Yeah, and that's where it comes from. Where it comes from, crossfading is an audio thing and the video thing. Yeah, and it's
so it's essentially a multiplier, right? Multiplies by 1, it gives you full.
Yes, it's bypassing the notch filter. That's it. And you can actually,
it's so brilliant. It's such a nice piece of code, and the thing is, most people will fail to appreciate it.
Actually, the idea by Joe Lucid, the original RPM filter guy. So
right. Shout out to Joe Lucid. So that's Torsten.
Yeah.
We don't see him as much anymore these days, but he was the guy behind a lot of stuff, especially the RPM stuff, right? So yeah. It's good to mention these guys because there's so many of you fellas working in Betaflight, and it's grand for Stephen and I to be able to be in on these groups and watch it all take place. It's just awesome. But yeah, I think people fail to appreciate that there's actually normal people on the other side. Some not so normal.
And one more thing. Why don't we just turn it off instantly?
Yeah.
Well, we could just turn it off, turn it on. Like a switch, like a light switch, but we need to dim it because otherwise we would have nasty edges in our gyro signal.
Right.
If we turn it off, we have kind of an edge.
That's exactly.
Nasty,
a step,
and that would introduce a step, and that would introduce a burst of noise. Just
right.
For
and I guess even the ringing too. You. Oh wait, now. So yeah. Right. I see what you mean. You got to turn off the gain of the notch slowly.
So instead of turning it off instantly, we dim it out.
Exactly. So, yeah.
And with this image, it's not actually the moving curve is not a that's the result, isn't it? After the crossfade actually comes in and out, right?
Exactly. Yeah, that's the crossfading working on the notch. Yeah. So if you have a K value of 0.5, you only attenuate 50% of the signal. Yeah. Of the noise.
Someone just wrote, "Doesn't everyone just love Kalman filtering?" I don't know. That's kind of left field. Just thought I'd mention that.
Yeah,
well,
I don't think it's a Kalman in 4.3, but
Kalman filtering is pretty complicated if you do it right. So Chris Rosser actually looked at it, but it's a lot of math, and you actually have to know your flight the model, the mathematical model of the flight dynamics. You have to have it in code to predict what's happening and to kind of decide if what the Kalman filter does. So it's very complicated, but yeah.
I didn't mean to bring that up. That's fighting words for some people.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we have a few minutes left. I think what I should do is probably take a little pause and come back, and maybe we could you have this really cool animation showing the crossfades. I'd love to look at that. And then talk a little bit about phase delay and filter delay, because this is something that's completely elusive to people. And yeah, I have something I wouldn't mind showing then. And then, of course, we'll analyze a couple of log files. I have a few there that we could look at. So yeah, if people would hang out, don't leave us. We'll be back in just a few minutes. All right. Okay, we are back. Oh, look at that, MATLAB. Here you go, folks. We're ready to talk about code.
Yeah, right. Need to open it back up. Okay. So
yeah, that other cool animation you had, I wanted to see that.
That was the animation to see the crossfading effect. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And now we want to see how it actually works.
How it actually
I guess.
works,
So,
exactly.
So I'm going to open up another photo. All right. So now we can see something similar, but now you can see the notch center move with frequency. Before that, we could only see the effect of the dimming, of the crossfading. And now, let's look at the bottom here. The RPM.
So that's your default min hertz for the RPM, right? So if we set our default,
yeah, that's at 100.
Hertz, right?
Yeah, exactly, and that's the limit. Lower, it's the notch cannot go lower than min hertz.
Right, right.
So
isn't the default fading though starting 50 hertz?
Yeah, the default is 50. Yeah, I just made it 200 so that we can see it a little bit better.
That's actually you can adjust that in the CLI if that was something you thought was important.
Exactly.
But yeah.
So right now the fade range is 100 hertz, so it goes from 100 to 200, but the default is 50, so it goes from 100 to 150.
Can you stop that animation at the fade start? So before it's is that possible? It's a GIF.
Unfortunately, it's not. It's a GIF.
So I guess what I'm thinking is, so at the top plot, what you're looking at is the gain of the notch. So when it's deep, when it's right down at the upper end there, the notch is centered at 200, and then
so
as the
everything
RPM
above
goes down,
200 is total
totally filtered out,
totally attenuated. Yeah,
right.
But if you approach 200. And then go into the fading range, then the weight or the K value, as we've seen before, dims down the notch. And
so just to give an example, what you'd be doing to produce this, you'd be going up and down on your throttle. You'd be about half throttle, zero, throttle, zero, half throttle, zero. So what's happening here is, imagine that you're at, say, about 40% throttle, and it's at 200, then you bring it down and your throttle hits zero. And that slowly fades you out there, right?
Exactly, yeah. So it fades out up to the point where it would normally ring at 100 hertz. But because it's now being ignored by Betaflight, the ringing, it still rings, the notch rings, but it's not going to be fed into the signal. So,
but doesn't this also mean that, so the old notches you would still have, so when you'd come down close to zero throttle, you'd still have full attenuation at some point, say 110 or 120 hertz. So in other words, what I'm thinking is, with it set like this at its defaults, wouldn't you also, this also means that you don't have any notch attenuation at 100 hertz that you would have had before. So if there was noise there, you're not hitting it.
It's not getting filtered.
Yeah, but it's not getting filtered, and we actually, the motor noise is not as strong in the range from 150 to 100.
Right.
At least for 5-inch quads.
Right, depends on the quad, because I've noticed, for example, on X on the Cinelifter rigs, sometimes that motor noise dips right down to like about 80 hertz. So with those defaults
so
here, you won't get that. Yeah. So does this mean, for example, though, that I'd need to adjust the min hertz down well below 80 hertz in order to get this to function in that case? There's always a risk then, of course, that you got your notches going too low. But if the motor noise dips down as low as 80 hertz, I'd need to set min hertz something like, say, 60 or 50, which kind of makes me
probably
nervous.
Yeah.
But in theory, it's fading out.
The thing is, you're going to have to set it according to how much motor noise and how much kind of attenuation you need, because you might get, if you get the 80 hertz motor noise, you might not need that much attenuation anyway, I'm guessing. Like,
that's true. That's true.
Yeah, so maybe you can set it to 70 and then a fading range of 20 to 30 hertz. So it's
gotcha. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, I guess the other thing too,
I don't have much experience with center lifters. So
the other thing I do notice with those big rigs is they don't have obviously the same authority as a small rig, so you don't generate this kind of oscillation very easy that you'd get, for example, if you had notches too low on a 5-inch, you'd really know it because it'd start to oscillate and take off. But you don't have that kind of authority on a bigger rig. So, but we don't really know where that point is. But I've been playing in that area, and I'm very cautious about it. But certainly, this is interesting because I know I recently had somebody with a 9-inch rig, and now it even dips lower. And it's like it gets into the zone where I have a lot of experience with 5-inch copters and what it means, what oscillation means at say 50 hertz there. But with a center lifter, it's just a different world altogether. And so we got to use caution.
It's more of a pain, isn't it? Because everything's low frequency.
It's actually a good point. It really is kind of a pain. And you see more and more a push towards maybe even like 10 inches as they're putting bigger and bigger payloads on. But when you get to even to those bigger props, like I start to wonder if, even the whole braking, the ESC braking is even functioning well in that case. And, there's a lot of things a lot of unknowns, I think, still in that world.
I would just say about this crossfading as well is that it is kind of amazing that because completely fading out the notches has such a massive gain. But
you can see it in the face.
Yeah.
And I can see a question from Omar Hughes. Yeah. So wondering what happens with RPM crossfading on versus off in flight. What will the pilot see? So we can see in the phase graph down here. If the phase goes down towards minus 90 degrees, the more it goes down, the more delay you will get in your filters. And right around 50 to 60 hertz, 40, 50, 60 hertz is where you have propwash, even 20 hertz, but you have propwash oscillations down there. So the more the phase shifts down, the more propwash you have. So as you can see, if the notch gets crossfaded and it's off, there is no phase shift anymore. So you don't have as much propwash. So
it'd be nice if you had an animation where you had the center frequency of the notch down lower, so you could see where that. Do you have one of those? It doesn't matter too much, but
no.
But I guess the other thing here though too is people are not used to thinking about phase delay in terms of actual phase. We've often called it phase delay, but really what we're talking about is most people are used to seeing filter delay and they look at milliseconds, but of course it has to be converted to phase to be meaningful for us.
And it's not a fixed number either, because
it's dependent on frequency.
Dependent on frequency, exactly.
The complicated part,
exactly. But now we can simplify it a bit because the important frequencies, I would say the important ones in the sense that the ones that will result in more prop wash, and that would be centered around sort of 50 hertz-ish, maybe a little lower, a little higher. So
you can see that the notches actually don't introduce a lot of delay down low, but at around at the center frequency you can see it's
right, exactly.
The phase delay is extremely high.
And actually where it's really high too, it's delayed. So it's delayed in the opposite direction depending on what side of the notch, right? So it's delayed.
Yes.
On the
if the phase goes towards plus 90 degrees, it's actually leading. It's leading the signal.
Right.
It's not delayed, but
would you guys say, like, for the benefit of the viewers, phase delay? Simple way of putting it is that it's the kind of distortion of the frequencies around the filter that essentially it's like a sort of change in the distortion of the movement within the quadcopter. Is that kind of a way to describe phase delay that's kind of makes some sense to people?
It certainly distorts the signal. I mean, if you think about this phase delay being as you approach the notch center from the lower frequencies, it's lagging, But then at the center frequency, it's 180 degrees out of phase, as what you'd expect. Yeah. Remember the whole anti-signal thing, the phase cancellation headphone idea. So at that center, which is here, say 200 hertz, it's actually 180 degrees out of phase, but you can see then the line goes straight up and down. And then at that point, it flips over, and now the lag starts going the opposite direction. So it's
you could say...
that's distortion that generates.
And you could say that that's a bad thing because it's essentially changing what is in the real world, or the reality of the signal.
Yeah.
You're distorting what was the signal, and that's obviously a bad thing because then you're not getting the most kind of accurate representation of what was there.
Yeah, exactly, because our signals are pushing the copter in one direction or another, in the terms. The direction in which the terms push and the timing in which they push in any given direction matters. And so if you shape that and you change that in any way in those frequencies that are critical for the control of the copter, then of course you're changing its responsivity in one way or the other. And I had a little example that I could show to sort of illustrate that, because I don't want to harp on it too much, but if you don't mind, I could share my screen.
Yeah, I mean, the discussion on phase is something that we've been obviously talking about.
A lot, exactly.
Sort of feels like the next step in terms of trying to establish, the best way to get the best performance out of the quadcopter and protecting certain areas of frequencies.
Exactly.
Things like that.
Let me quickly take you through this. Just I wouldn't want to spend too much time on it. People will get lost in it. But this was an interesting log file because this was, I believe, Betaflight 429, and this is. When you look down here, you see, well, let me just point it out. The red here is the set point. So this person's just moving the quad around randomly. This is the sort of basement tune thing that I talk about a lot. But the main thing here is you can see the black curve. That's the gyro. And the gray is the unfiltered or pre-filtered gyro. So what looks like noise here, sometimes you'd see this, right? But if we zoom in on that, just watch this. This is a classic case of oscillation, right? And this is probably a case exactly what you're describing, where at this point where the throttle is really low, all those notches from the RPM come down and generate this latency. Now, if you look at the pre-filtered signal, that's the gray, you can see that at any given point the latency is kind of different, right? But in general there's a kind of lag there. So there's your black is your filtered gyro, pre-filtered gray. Just let me turn off the set point for a minute. What I'm going to do is just smooth out the gray curve a little bit. So this is zero phase filtering because it's offline, so it doesn't affect the overall sort of shift in the curves in any direction. But this allows you to see then, if we zoom in a little closer, you can see that this is our pre-filtered signal. There's our post-filtered signal. I'm going to just add PIDtoolbox to this now really quickly. It's going to bring me back there. Okay. So this is a lot to look at, but if you think about it, the PIDtoolbox is always pushing perfectly opposing the gyro. The problem is that this is not the actual position of the copter, right? Copter position is actually here. This is the pre-filtered gyro. That's actually closer to where the copter is in actual space. So if you take any moment in time, for example, where the copter is at 0. So if I just put a point down here at the gray at 0, can't actually get, so the sample actually goes between the two. So if I just pick that point, say, what you'll notice is that at this point, the copter is barely moving, presumably. It's close to 0. So it's not rolling, not pitching forward, not pitching back. It's just pretty much centered, right? At this point in the oscillation. But at the same time, the PIDtoolbox is way up here, 90 degrees, or almost 90 degrees out of phase with that. So what's happening is P is, well, you can sort of see it here. P is pushing when actually the copter is not oscillating. So it's not actually opposing the real movement of the copter. It's opposing the movement that it thinks the copter's in, that because of the filter delay. So, but again, this delay is not very much. So if I actually measure that delay from the gray, pre-filtered to the post-filtered, only talking about 5 milliseconds. That doesn't seem like very much, but this is about 50 hertz, I think, the oscillation, something like that. So if I just go peak to peak,
That's weird.
Oh,
you don't tend to get oscillation with just a 5 millisecond gyro latency, though.
Oh, yeah, you do. So
okay, you're talking about these little peaks.
Yeah. So let me. So this is about 40 hertz. Actually, I missed that point there. So if I just take that point.
Yeah, but I
you're
think
45
we get the
hertz.
idea. Yeah.
You see, so you're at about 50 hertz here. So the way I usually do the math in my head, 50 hertz is a great center point because it's close enough to where we often see prop wash. Maybe prop wash is often a little bit lower frequency than this, but it's close to that point. Okay, and so what happens is, so to do the math is easy, and if you think about the phase relationship, 5 milliseconds is approximately 90 degrees at a phase. So it's like every millisecond costs you about 18 degrees of phase shift in phase space. And so 5 milliseconds is like enormous in that space of phase at this particular frequency. It's even worse as you go to higher frequencies, right? At 100 hertz is even worse. But the fortunate thing is, we can put our notches at, say, 100 or 150. It doesn't matter as much if you have 5, 10, or not milliseconds, but if you have 180 degree out of phase signal at, say, 200 hertz, you're going to have that anyway. But those are not the frequencies that are really controlling the copter, right? So, it can still certainly introduce problems, but I think the real problem that we often see is the delay that gets then converted to phase, obviously, and it's basically, this is just PIDtoolbox too. I'm not even showing dterm here, so of course dterm is also delayed, and it's not pushing exactly in the right position, at the right time, right?
Right.
But the key is where to cross over. I just wanted to point that out because if you think about it, what you really want is, well, actually you want it to even be in advance. Ideally you'd want P to be, because it's going to take some amount of time for that signal to drive the motors, and then the motors have to respond to that. So we know all that's too slow, right? But nonetheless, I think this is the crux of where those oscillations come from. So when you start turning those gains up too high and you have too much filter delay, you're basically at a point where P-term crosses over and the same. So at this point, for example, P is crossing.
So basically, it's doing the opposite of what it's actually supposed to do. That's
Right,
what you're trying to say.
Exactly.
Yeah. Pushing in the opposite direction.
It's pushing It's pushing in the same direction as the oscillation here, right?
And because it's a fixed latency, then that's why it oscillates, because it's kind of going round and round, right?
Exactly. It gets itself in a feedback loop, and it's kind of like I use the analogy like if you were trying to, something is moved, I don't know, I'm trying to think of some kind of mechanical thing, and you're just pushing at the wrong time, and rather than actually countering it, you're actually pushing it into the same direction that the problem is of the problem, right? So it is a feedback loop. I usually call it, I think some people call it, let's just say most of this is driven by dterm. Usually I think dterm is the culprit in a lot of cases. But in any case, if you had, too much delay on the gyro or too much delay on dterm, you'd start to get this. So I don't know if it's one of those things where I wish I could explain it really well, but I think at least we can take the idea of milliseconds back to the phase concept, and I think that's why these small numbers, sometimes people think it's trivial, but 5 milliseconds is like, nearly 90 degrees out of phase at this frequency.
Way too much, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, what do you guys want to do now? Where are we about in this? I haven't looked and see if there's any interesting questions.
Well, I can talk about the tune or what we're going to do, prop wash, or?
Yeah, exactly. So, that same concept of what I was describing should apply to prop wash as well, right?
Yeah, I guess it's quite unusual that we're using that much gyro low pass filtering, and I guess obviously what we found over the last couple of years is reducing the gyro latency as much as possible, but then we can actually, and I think this is something that maybe we need to flesh out a little bit more in the data, but I know that me and you, Brian, we've been flying with pretty decent amount of dterm filtering, and I think you can see Chris Rosser obviously as well has been doing tunes using a biquad at 100 hertz on the dterm, which is pretty heavy. And I would do similar 100, 120 or something like that. And but it doesn't seem to negatively affect, as far as I can tell,
as much as filtering
actually,
on the as much as
yeah, definitely.
So what you're saying is more filtering on the dterm side doesn't seem to be as detrimental as filtering on the gyro side.
Exactly. Yeah.
I don't know why that's the case, to be honest, and that's an interesting observation. But I feel like I've observed the same thing, but I don't like getting into sort of areas where we don't have evidence to support why it's the case. But I totally agree with you.
We have
and
a theory,
I still find myself,
I'd say we have a theory, don't we? That the fact that the dterm is just ahead of it's a term that maybe has enough, has some lateral, if you delay it a little bit, it doesn't have such a big effect. Could be that, I don't know.
Well, also
maybe,
the quality of the dterm signal. I think dterm is always so noisy as well. So,
right,
what benefit do you get from a signal that's just going all over the place? So
yeah,
I think there's.
But the PIDtoolbox primarily does control the craft. I mean, that's the main controlling term, and yeah, so maybe that's why it just damages the performance more when you delay the PIDtoolbox.
We have lots more. It's a really it's an interesting area, and people that are really that just are hardcore about this when it comes to propwash, they come up with good ways to make it better, and I don't know what the theory is behind it. Like I said, obviously phase delay, but it's something that I still struggle with in the field. You always get in the field and you end up playing around with the dterm or the filter cutoffs until it suits you. But that's I try to stay away as much away from that as possible and try to stick to data-driven results. But at the end of the day, when we're in the field, we're always doing that, aren't we?
Yeah, well, it suddenly sounds like it's getting very controversial. Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm a little bit more kind of comfortable with tuning according to how things are in the field. But yeah, I mean, it would be good, to be honest, to back that up with some data, and maybe we can find a way of doing that. But it does. You would say that if we both kind of found a similar, obviously Chris Ross has found similar,
Yeah, it's worth looking into. It's certainly a hypothesis worth trying to test in some way to figure out what's actually going on. But I totally agree. I've done ridiculous things that would, with dterm cutoff, filter cutoffs down to 60 hertz on a biquad, and you would think it would just fly away, but I've experimented all around there, but you certainly can't do that on the gyro. You can't go close to that on the gyro. Yeah. You'd get a fly rate.
I remember you kept saying to me, you got to try it at 60 hertz.
Yeah, it's weird. I think, on the one hand, I think with the really low cutoff, it really cleaned up the dterm signal. So if you look at it, it looks like a signal. It doesn't look like just a noise mess, which is what dterm often looks like. So there's got to be some aspect to that. But then you've lost one aspect. You've caused it to be very slow. So the latency went up a lot. But so I often think there's a kind of a sweet spot between the amount of D-gain and the amount of filter delay there, but it's tricky.
Well, it depends. Like, what's the primary role of the dterm? Is it to stop the overshoot of the PIDtoolbox?
Well,
is it to be in advance of the PIDtoolbox?
Well, that's the in the general tuning aspect of it. But when it comes to controlling forward flight stability or prop wash or turbulent air, then it is a bit of a different game, right? Because at that point, you're not set point is 0. You're basically saying let go of the sticks and how's the forward flight stability. I've had these discussions with Chris Thompson. He would argue in those cases, what you really want is really high D gain for just cruising along, and then as soon as you move the sticks, have it go back. So there's some discussion about how we might deal with that, and I think it's the same principle. You know, you want D is the fastest term we have. It's the fastest thing to respond to any kind of external.
If you have really high D gain and then you have not that much,
you create another problem.
Shitloads of noise.
Yeah, you create another problem. So
it's like all the balance, really, isn't it?
It is. It is. Yeah. So you know, it's amazing what you guys have done, the developers and you, Jan, and everybody else, and we just sit here and we reap the rewards of it, and it's totally fantastic what's been going on. So I'm totally stoked at where it's going. But there's lots of things that we still need to address, I think, and we need to better. But
right,
man, 4.3 is just a spectacular piece of work. You think about where we were 5 years ago. So but yeah, it's great stuff.
So basically now we can get the gyro latency to below 1 millisecond. So that's pretty good.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, basically,
and we still have a very clean trace.
Yeah. So that's kind of a non-issue almost now. You know, it's like what's the next step, right? But yeah, good stuff, boys. I don't know what.
We still got any viewers then, or has everyone dropped off?
30, it says here 39, but this thing is about probably 5 minutes behind. So, well, that's the videos 5 minutes behind.
Yeah, a lot of questions about tuning. So I guess we can.
Yeah.
Can go and.
I do have those log files. I did promise some people that we would look at the log files. What do you guys think of that? You want to look at a couple of log files and give me?
Yeah.
Why not? Let's just take a glance at it. Yeah. So I will share my screen with you, so you can see what's going on. And let me come out of this. So I put them in order because whoever sent them first, I think that's fair. Oh, I actually have a few race logs here. I don't know if you guys want to go into that, or should we actually talk about other people's? But I have
Limon.
I have Limon's race log. Anybody who know who Limon is? Limon is he's a Betaflight developer too. But Limon is like
really?
an incredible racer. Is he even in the chat? Where's Limon? He's probably not here. I should have sent him
a... let's see.
But yeah, he's obviously an incredible racer. I watch his videos. It's just mind-boggling. But he's the developer of the wonderful presets. This is just amazing. This is a really...
And the motor reorientation. And...
Oh, he did all that stuff too, did he?
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah,
it's good combination of skills, racer and he has his hands on the code.
Mm.
But anyway,
his log is crazy.
This is his log here. So the black line on here, I thought just want to focus your attention on that. This is throttle. I'm not used to seeing this at all. Let me just quickly show you. This is what freestylers do. Sorry, I don't know.
Totally
I'm picking on someone here now that probably. This is what some freestylers do. This is probably cruising. You know, this is probably more typical of what freestylers do. They're like just cruising around, and then 1,000,000 degrees per second, and then they're cruising along, and then 1,000 degrees per second, and then cruising along.
Oh, I've seen a lot. I've seen a lot from this guy.
So this is typical flying, though, right? They do this, and then, but there's nothing in between, right? So we'll look at racers. Racers are just going nuts. But here's the interesting thing: it's all on roll. Nothing happening on yaw. There's hardly anything on pitch. This is another guy here. This is actually from Chris Thompson, but it's not Chris. It's the flyer is Chris. I don't know who this is. I think Zach knows him, but this is quite interesting. So this fly is a little less aggressive with the throttle anyway.
That's Zach's frame, isn't it?
Exactly. And this is a fella who flies, these are where they have to have a throttle limit, like 75% throttle max. So you can see the max limit is set to 75. This guy is, so when these guys are racing, the throttle is always right at as high as it goes. So
that's mad. That is almost full throttle, yeah.
Yeah, well, it's almost, well, 75% throttle the whole way, but yeah, unfortunately, guys, we're gonna run out of Zoom is gonna cut us off again. Damn it, I should just get a Zoom.
Got 9 minutes.
Good, 9 minutes, okay. Yeah, maybe 9 minutes is enough. What do you guys think? Somebody say something in the
whack
chat.
on the spectral analyzer, yeah.
Let's whack on the spectral analyzer. Let's pick... this is the first guy to send. Okay, let's just look. Spectral. There we go. So I can tell you what I do first. I mean, I always look at this, you know, because the black line is the gyro. So if the red, the set point covers it for the most part, I'm like, that should be pretty good, right? In general. But anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, then usually what do we do? Oh, or this down. Oh, by the way, I'm not against Black Box Explorer. This is just what I have open.
Well, it is your software, so.
So this guy, this is a Soobin Kim. I'm probably pronouncing that right. My apologies. This is a 7-inch thick. Okay, so this is one of the big rigs. So this is that estimated latency in PIDtoolbox. I think this is actually Betaflight 4.3. It is, yeah. So this would normally be 6 milliseconds. So there's something really magical happened there, obviously.
Jan, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
So what throttle range is the noisiest in terms of the amplitude? Because obviously it's low enough, because I don't get any bleed when we have I'm not currently getting any bleed with the defaults anyway, with the fade in. So is there an area of the throttle range that is the noisy? Well,
depends on how fast the motors are spinning. If you're talking about the RPM filters, yeah. Even if you're turning the quad, maybe some motors are spinning down even though you have 100% throttle. So it's hard to say. It's hard to link it to the throttle. But I mean, these graphics here probably show it pretty well. Where the noisiest part is right here. It's at 30% throttle. Yeah.
Yeah, it does seem to me that, I don't know if it's connected to the frames that we use, but there's always more noise actually around that kind of third, 1/3 of the throttle, so 30%. You can see it right there, and it seems to resonate frames as well.
That's true. Yeah. That's pretty common. You're exactly right. So what do you guys think? Well, let's give it a scale of 0 to 10. 10 being just perfect. Sorry, I'm kidding. I don't want to pick on anybody here, but this actually looks reasonable. But there is this sort of little beamer going across on pitch.
In terms of the noise,
yeah. This is
not bad.
This is pre-filtered, post-filtered.
That's not bad for pre-filter.
That's what I thought. So this is a thick, a 7-inch thick. So I think with the smaller props, it's not quite as bad, but. But the thing with the thick, so this is a question for Yen. So Yen, a lot of times I see, obviously you see the first motor band, the first harmonic or the fundamental, whatever people want to call it. But sometimes you don't see a second, or I don't think you see a second, but you see a third. I don't know if in this case this might not be a case of that, or the third is pretty weak. But I've often thought it'd be great if we could select which harmonic we want. So for example, maybe it doesn't matter nowadays. Maybe it doesn't matter because RPM is not really costing very much. But I think still on an X8, this 3 milliseconds you see here, if this was a typical X4, that'd probably be down to a millisecond or something. So
yeah.
So something obviously is still costing a bit here. And if I could turn off, the second harmonic, which costs you a lot more than the third. I often say if you're going to get rid of a harmonic, right, you might as well get rid of both or leave all three on, because the difference between 2 and 3 is nothing, right?
Yeah.
But
and about 1 or 2 months ago, there was a guy who approached me. Sorry, I forgot the name, but he said the same thing, and he asked if it was worth it to do it. Back then, I said no, probably not worth it because we don't know if it's always the case that the third harmonic is more pronounced than the second, but I don't know.
So like, what would you do here?
I mean, a lot of
would
stuff you could test.
Would you go RPM 3 here? I mean,
4.4.
RPM 3 is working, but like,
in my frames, I always go 3 harmonics because the third and the second and third harmonic don't
really cost you much.
Don't really do much. Yeah.
I wondered though, for example,
when it comes to prop wash,
I wondered if RPM 1 here and then using like 1 or 2 dynamic notches would take care of that. And you like, and for an X8, maybe you would see some saving.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, could be, could be a use case there. I mean, we
I have
would
to
need
say
to
that
test
I do.
that.
What are your thoughts?
I mean, I do see what Brian says as well, like in the sense that it's weird that sometimes you get the fundamental and you get the third harmonic, let's call it, but no seconds. And so you think, well, yeah, that's a pain because then I've got to run all 3 or just 1. But I don't know, it might be quite cool to have 1 and 3 option. But the other thing is that it can be difficult to know specifically if it is, like, do we know for sure that is the third harmonic?
Let's see, it's 200. It's a third harmonic, because 200 times 3 is 600. So it's
I see. Okay.
I'm looking at 60% throttle and then multiply by.
So keep that in mind because I see this most frequent now, almost like, and maybe it's because I'm looking at so many X8s, but usually I just don't see that second harmonic.
I mean, is it always so silent, the second one?
Yeah.
I don't get it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay.
But are you saying that, Brian, you'd be using all the RPM filters on an X8?
No, I haven't. Especially for guys. A lot of these guys are still running 429. And in fairness, I guess they're putting $10,000 Komodos on, so like they don't take any chances with anything new ever. So I have I try to convince them. I think 4.3 is still really great for them, but what we've often been doing is just going RPM 1 and then dealing with it with the dynamic notch and low pass filtering.
There's quite a common kind of annoyance in this log, which we can see obviously in the pitch. That huge blob at 100 hertz or something, and then they're still getting through in the dterm.
Exactly.
Not easy to solve, is it?
It's not. Well, I mean that's probably a good case for helping target it with well, actually, it's interesting. So that might be, so this is 4.3. So this might be a case, for example, where the crossfade min hertz could come down a bit, but it's not going to help you down here. This is obviously something.
Probably question.
Yeah.
Question for Jan as well is that, I mean, in terms of using these dynamic notches, how much are they moving around so that would you cause problems by reducing the hertz? So for some of these bigger rigs, obviously we've got the lower frequency resonances like we got there, and even lower. And I'm just kind of curious. I know that it's sort of, people say don't do that, but like, how far can you?
1 minute left.
Oh,
1 minute left.
All right.
Quick answer.
Let's come back. Let's come back. We'll come right back in a minute. See you in a minute, folks. Hang on. Don't go anywhere. We are back. We are back. Hey, still got people. They didn't go. Okay, so what? Yeah, where were we? I didn't want to lose our train of thought there, so I wanted to get back quickly.
So we're talking about kind of how low you can go with
how low you can go.
Obviously,
exactly.
the RPM notches. One of the problems was the fact there's so many collecting at a certain frequency, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
But with a dynamic notch, you don't have so much of that problem. So maybe it's not such a big deal to go a bit low. I don't know.
Yeah. So the notches don't overlap. Just overlap sometimes, but they don't all overlap. So it's not as much of a problem if you go lower. You still have a little bit of ringing if you if the lowest dynamic notch is at its limit and the noise goes below that limit, just like with the RPM notches. So you can still see a little bit of ringing, but it's not nearly as much.
Yeah, I was going to say that it's not as bad because they're not moving quite as fast, because the ringing is like an artifact from the movement. Is that right?
Yeah, it's only one notch that's ringing. So it's the RPM notches. It could be 4 or 12 or whatever together.
I'm gonna run another log file here if you guys are okay with that. I'm actually gonna I'm gonna go past this one. My apologies, Tens. I realized I got the wrong log file here, so that's not optimal. But I'm gonna run a log file. This person, Casper Splawinski. My apologies if I'm pronouncing that wrong. Oh.
There's another point to make, that even if there is noise in the log or in the analysis, it may not be a problem. Like, that's another thing that's worth thinking about, is how much noise can you tolerate without it really actually having any impact at all? Because obviously when you've got all these toys to play with, all the filters, and you just think, oh yeah, brilliant, let's just like use them all and filter everything, so it's completely, so it looks dark. Yeah, that's not necessarily going to get the best results, is it?
No, well, in most cases too. Obviously, in order to do that, you have to use a lot more than just lots of low pass filtering, and then of course the probability of that. Remember, I was telling you, but we were talking about that oscillation that you get from too much filter delay.
Yeah.
The probability of that goes up as you start to clean things up. So it's kind of an inverse relationship, a little counterintuitive, but you clean things up here in this window, and you up the probability of this sub 100 hertz junk through. And so, there certainly is a trade-off. But, when I see like a haze like this, one of the problems here is that we know what's going to happen in dterm. That gets amplified a lot. So, but this is an interesting log file. So this is more typical. It's not really super typical, but it's
not as clean as the last one, but it still has 3.5 milliseconds of gyro delay, which is for 4.3. That's a lot. I mean, the Karate Tune, for example, has less than 1 millisecond.
Yeah, I should say these estimates might be really dependent upon how much the pilot moves. So, for example, if this was just a throttle sweep log where there was no stick input, then the estimate's going to be crappy, because you need the signal to move off of the zero line. It can't do a cross correlation lag of a straight line, right? You get nothing really.
Oh yeah.
So I wouldn't pay too much attention. Usually I get these estimates only when I'm doing lots of movement. That's what I would use for that. But anyway, this is pretty noisy, but I still think you're better off having all the noise up here. You can address it. It's really bad if the noise is down around 100 hertz, because you obviously have to target it with either by dropping the low pass down or notches, and of course we've already discussed that.
He's still got quite a lot of bleed though, hasn't he? Because the dterm's bringing that out. Because I mean, I think it's important to remember, isn't it, that this is just the scale that we're using here is just, it's just what it is. It's just kind of, there's still noise that's left over from after the filtering, that it just doesn't look like much. But when it gets hit by the dterm, it's like boom.
Exactly. When I look at this, I think, like, what can RPM do for you here, Jan? What harmonic is this?
Yeah, that's an overlap of resonance and the motor harmonic, I guess. But
if you think about how narrow the notches are, it's still actually doing a pretty mad job. I mean, because you've got a bit of you need a low pass filter on.
Oh yeah,
that,
you cannot see the actual width of the vibration in these plots. You can only see that in the frequency times time plots.
Okay, right.
Because all the noise is overlaid in these throttle plots. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Well, and you don't know how much of this was taken care of by the low pass filters too.
Yeah, but
you
the
sort of get a
vibrations,
sense
the
that the
motor noise is very thin, so
yeah,
the notch can
usually you can tell where
exactly
the
cut it out.
You can see where the notches went, right? That little empty space in there. This is an X8, so they're going to go low, and there's another one here. But it missed all this, which is fairly broadband. So actually, it's kind of like it's like this, but so yeah, I don't know what I would do here, to be honest. Certainly get more of those. If this is 4.3, I'd be using more of the dynamic notches, right? At least 2, maybe 3.
Yeah.
Hoping that one would go here, one would go here.
3, yeah.
And probably in that case, see, I'd probably go RPM 1 here and go with 3 dynamic notches, and
sounds good, yeah.
And then bring the low pass, keep the low pass. I wouldn't bring it up above, but keep it down here, maybe even bring the second one down. But of course you're adding more latency, but I often think with the bigger rigs too that latency is not quite as big an issue, but
yeah. And these the dynamic notches, I think you said to me that if you have let's say 5 active and there's not 5, they haven't detected 5 peaks, they go and just sort of sit at the top of the so
they just stop moving.
Yeah, so they stop moving, but are they kind of a very low latency, quite high up, or will they stay the same latency?
They stay the same latency. Wherever they are, they just sit there and vibe along.
You just chill for the ride, but okay, I don't know. I thought they kind of go higher, but I suppose they're keeping the same latency. So yeah. I mean, it's not worth then running more than maybe you need, just in case, because you're going to
and they stay at the same spot because I also try to raise them up to the max hertz, but that doesn't work out because it just introduces a lot of jitter. Because if then there is a peak again, it goes up and then you need to go down again, and then you have these very weird jittery lines.
Can I answer a question? I just wanted to address a question here from Banny UK. It says, what does it mean if there's no gyro delay estimate on the log file? So if you see nothing up here, it just couldn't do anything with the data. So that'll happen if, for example, there was no movement, or one possibility is you have no gyro delay. That's pretty rare. Also, you got to remember the precision of this is going to be tied to the log rate. So it's a 0.5 millisecond precision here if you're logging at 2K. It's 0.25 if you're logging at 4K. Nobody should do that, by the way. I'm not suggesting that, but yeah, if it goes to 0 milliseconds, it probably just means didn't produce enough movement on the axis for it to actually get some measure. So this is another log file. This is from, I'm not going to be able to pronounce that name. Can you guys pronounce that? Eoin O'Callaghan? O'Callaghan, I can pronounce that part.
Is it Eoin?
Eoin O'Callaghan.
Like an Irish name. Yeah.
I think you're right, exactly. Eoin O'Callaghan. Okay, so this is an interesting log file. Obviously, when you see these black regions here, it means you're just not using the full throttle range. So we don't know what's happening up there if you only hit, say, 75% throttle. But up to that point, we can look at this and say, this is an interesting case. Where are the harmonics? And what is this? Right. What rig is this? This is a QAV Pro Whoop. So that's one of these new kind of like these Cinewhoop type things. I guess it's a 4-inch or 3-inch or something. I'm not sure. There's so many variants of these out now.
I think it uses 5-inch for the new QAV Pro.
Is it? Okay. It's a 5-inch. Okay. Interesting. But yeah, but these aren't ducted, right? They're actually, is this the one that's actually just a carbon?
Yeah, it's carbon ring sandwich type thing.
Yeah, right. So yeah, it's interesting. No harmonics, right? So what would you do here? I mean, why do you need RPM 2 and 3 on? You
don't.
You don't. Exactly. But this here, you might as well forget it. There's nothing that can get rid of that except for a low pass. And when it goes way down, you got to figure this out, right? This is when I look at this kind of stuff, I'm like, there's not much you can do with it, So it's doing a pretty good job, but I would lower the low pass. At least one PT1 you're going to want down at about 100 hertz. So by default, Betaflight has the 2 PT1s on, and you just move the slider. But there's some cases, for example, where so this would call for moving the slider down, but then that's going to bring both of them down. And in many respects, there's not much more happening up here. Like if you could just bring one down, I think you'd probably save. So my approach to this would be take one PT1, bring it down here. The intensity of this is not that strong. So a single PT1 would probably be okay. You get rid of the second because you're gonna add that latency. What is it, a PT1 at 100 hertz? 1.25 milliseconds or so? Around abouts?
I have no idea.
I think it's something like that. So if you put a PT1 at 100 hertz on the gyro, just the one, get rid of the other one, that'd cost you 1.25 or 1.5 milliseconds max. And that would help you deal with this. It'd cut some of this down here. Because this is not really high amplitude. It's just there, But now, the stuff way down, there's no solution for that except for look for the mechanical problem.
It looks like it's kind of rattling or something around that mid-throttle.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is that the dynamic notch can kind of be surprising, like in terms of getting rid of noise, I think, as well. Like even if it looks quite sort of disparate.
Right.
Because it's kind of momentary flicking from the peak of, one peak to the next peak, and it's probably going to do a decent job, I would say.
So you think putting a couple of dynamic notches and forcing them to stay within, say, 100 to 400 milliseconds?
Yeah. Why not? Yeah. You may as well run them.
Yeah, true. Good point.
I mean,
I wouldn't worry about any of this. Like your low pass will take care of that, right? So forget about that. Yeah. That's probably an option too. But
one RPM notch.
But the question is though, what happens if an RPM or if gets stuck close to the min hertz, 100 hertz? Then doesn't that produce quite a bit of latency? It depends on the Q factor, but again, it comes back to that question we were saying about RPM. But I guess the difference is the number.
Because
of
just one notch, it's
a single
not
notch.
that much. Even at 100 hertz, that's probably not that bad. Yeah.
Right. Cool. Yeah. That makes sense. But yeah, that doesn't look like much here, but boy, look at it when dterm, right? So
yes, the dreaded blob.
Yeah, the dreaded blob.
Yeah.
So it certainly would look at what's causing that. So mechanical. It sucks when you get that kind of. Let's see if this one's better. This is,
but, I mean, without being, I don't want to be rude about them, but like with the Cinewhoop, you're not looking for like absolute, super performance, i.e. you just want clean video.
Well, especially if you're doing like most people and using real steady on a Hero or something like that, or you're using, the steadying software. So maybe at the end of the day, you just don't want the motors hot. So whatever you can do.
Yeah, and the other thing is as well is like, we got to, I don't know, you don't want to be too down on the low pass filter. Like it's still a good filter. Like a single PT1 is still a useful filter. And everyone's like, it's kind of, this is my worry about using the sliders, is that everyone just thinks that to get the best, they got to have everything at 2 times and just get rid of these low pass filters. But actually, we used to fly Betaflight 3.5. We had one PT1. We'd have it at 90 hertz and it was still flying pretty well. So
somewhere Zach is saying though 3.5, but it's but those were the Stone Ages.
Yeah.
But
it's not going to like that.
I hear what you're saying though. Definitely don't be so afraid of low pass filters. But yeah, I know what you mean. There's
It's only the peak.
kind of
it's like only when you're looking for the absolute maximum 5-inch sort of super high performance, you want to maybe not use much low pass filtering. But like for a lot of things like this Cinewhoop and stuff, it's gonna help, I think.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, generally on 4.3, now that we have so little noise with RPM crossfading, it helps just applying RPM notches and dynamic notches and try to not apply any low passes on gyro. I mean, Rosser, for example, Chris Rosser's tune, does it, if I remember correctly. Yeah. And then you also get the gyro latency down to below 1.5 milliseconds, which is pretty good, below 1. So
yeah. I mean, it's once you get above 500 hertz with the low pass, you're not really making with a single PT1. Right. You're not really like I used to fly just like what Chris uses, yeah, I don't know. I've come around to it. Obviously, talking to Chris Thompson quite a lot, he kind of got me back into using the PT1. So
yeah.
I think it's a balance. I think it's just only notches on the gyro for me is not. I think
on the BMI 270, you need one additional low pass. Exactly. That's 1 point. Yeah.
So guys, this is a log file from Robert Gluckman. This is an Apex. I guess that's an Apex 6-inch. What's the Apex?
It's an Apex.
Apex 6. Do you know this frame?
Well, if it's an Apex,
that's what Steel is flying.
Is this the Mr. Steel? Oh my God, this is the Mr.
That looks bad though. No, that doesn't look like an Apex to me. But maybe it's a different type of Apex.
This is an Apex. This is the Mr. Steel thing. Now, okay. What is this? This is not the first harmonic, honestly. This is the second or third harmonic, right? This is probably the second.
And it's got aliasing all over the place.
Yeah, there's some aliasing, but like if we can just ignore the aliasing, the second harmonic now.
He's probably got bad props.
Yeah, it's like it's way worse than the first. Is that the second, Jan? Can you confirm
that? Let me see it. Looks like the second. Yeah. Yeah. The third, you can see the third just a little bit at 20% throttle. It goes. Yeah. This one. This is very light. Yeah.
I bet you he's using the Apex and he's using those bi-blade ethics props, which I think they're really noisy.
Well, if that's it, yeah, for sure. But even on yaw, like that's crazy. That shouldn't be that bad.
I mean, maybe he didn't. Maybe some screws were loose or something. I don't know. Yeah, bad props, whatever. I don't know. And broken arm. I don't know.
He's filtering less than. Well, this could be default filters, but there's still a lot left over there. So yeah, definitely got to work at that one. Yeah, it's too bad. Definitely got to work at that one. Sorry, Robert. All right.
Well, hold on. Maybe we should give him some tips.
Yeah, go for it. You guys give him some tips. Well,
just destroy his build.
Wait, now, tip number 1: get a new frame. I'm only kidding. No,
I mean, Apex is a good frame.
Get some
new props.
Yeah.
Get some new props.
Yeah.
That's probably the first thing, and then maybe don't know. We have to see the setup to see what he's got going right now.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Okay, so that's all we'll say for that one for now. I'm just
MQZ FPV says my log is 6.
My log is 6. That's him. That's okay. He must be Mads Sommer. That must be Yeah, it says here MQZ FPV.
So this is also an Apex.
Oh, okay. You know this person?
It's in the comments. He says,
"Oh, sorry,
my Apex looks different."
I've had a look. I've had a look of this guy's Apex.
And it's a 6-inch as well. Okay, so this will be interesting.
It's with high PIDs, and we had a discussion about the PIDs.
Chugga. I got to make this program faster. Time I wait.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so this looks a lot better. Still kind
Look,
of
that's 1 and 3 again.
1 and 3, exactly. Interesting.
And that's a 5-inch.
Yeah. Oh, this is a 5-inch. It's. I think he's sending in the chat. It's a 6. Oh, number 6. Sorry. So that's the difference too. It's a 5-inch, so totally different prop. So certainly props must be playing a big role in this. As you said, Stephen. Yeah, this is not bad actually. This I'd consider as pretty good and easy to deal with.
Yeah, the filtered gyro trace looks good.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little bit of resonance at 250, 270, I would say, but
yeah,
it's a typical frame resonance.
Yeah. Other than that, yeah,
good stuff. Thumbs up.
And there's a little bit of bleed, isn't there? It looks like when the dterm's kind of there's a little bit left over from that resonance coming in, but I mean it's not causing a problem, I doubt.
Yeah, it looks good. Yeah,
no,
that's what you hope for. And Daniel Key.
So are we kind of just rating these logs?
Oh, I don't think we were. Yeah, we could rate them. I would give this one a thumbs up. I don't know. I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
I don't know. I said I would go through them, so anyway, I'll go through one more here. Let's
pretty
take a look
good.
at this.
I don't know.
That's pretty good. Pretty good. Yeah, I think that's really good actually. Like the
That's
pre-filter is
good.
good.
I mean, I've seen video from his build, and it's flying fine.
Yeah,
it's flying well. So
exactly.
No problems there, I think.
It's interesting though, the harmonics. As you start looking at a lot of log files, you start seeing the different patterns. So mostly, again, this is another case, right? This is a pretty sparse one, so there's not enough data probably to fill in the up beyond say 60% throttle. But I think again you can see, I guess that's the third again, right? The third and the first.
Yeah.
You know?
Probably.
So I mean, it's uncanny how often I see it. Now this is a 7-inch. Maybe
is this persuading you, Jan?
Persuading
you to do the 1 and 3 testing.
I mean, it'd be just cool to be able to, rather than, so right now you select 1, 2, or 3. Like you shouldn't even have any choice. If you're going to give a choice, allow it to have like 1 or 3, 1 and 2, or I don't know.
But there's only one other. There's only one other that's needed, though, isn't it? Because you can do 1, you can do 1 and 2.
That's
so the
true.
only one more choice is needed, which is 1 and 3.
Good point, Stephen. Now I don't know what that means in terms of coding, though. You know, sometimes that can be a bit of a nightmare. Who knows?
Yeah.
I mean, we have time for 4.4. We have time to try a few things. I mean, yeah.
By the way, I saw 4.3 RC2s already, just like that.
Jan's got some. I think there's some cool. Maybe I shouldn't say it, but there's already things happening down the road. Anyway, for 4.4.
Do you want to keep that a secret?
Well, it's
So I don't know what to say here. This is pretty clean. I don't think there's any real issues. Maybe there's some kind of little beamer that's at a place where you can't get at it. So this could be just where I cut the log and it could be bumped something. But anyway, I don't think we'll go on in this any longer. So
what's happening with it?
There's still 32 people hanging out, but I think it's been quite a while. We started at 3 to almost 2 hours. I think we should call it. Oh, somebody said Stephen, can I use your 7-inch pre-tune to start tuning my 7-inch quad? That's Drone Akaraya. You probably know this person, Drone Akaraya. I don't know.
No, I don't.
Well, he knows you.
It's very nice of him to ask. Yes, is the answer. You're more than welcome to use the tune. It's in the configurator, and
share.
Let us know if it works well.
So yeah, I don't know. There's 32 people. You guys got any questions? Or we're gonna, if there's any more questions, we can probably take a few, and then otherwise, we'll give it a few minutes.
I might actually just, if anyone is planning on using my tunes, you could also use this kind of calculator that I've made. and I think it seems to work pretty well. It's basic, but there's a link in the actual description.
Yeah, I forgot to mention that. Steven has some preset tunes in the new Betaflight 4.3 presets. That's some awesome stuff. So, Steven, you have some stuff there. Shout out to Zach, who's the sugar. I don't know what he goes by. Sugar K. He's got some stuff in there. So Zach is the good friend.
Yeah, he names his stuff as karate.
Right.
So.
Right. If anybody wondered who Karate is the guy to the left of me here.
KarateBrot. Yeah.
KarateBrot.
What's the brooch part?
Bread.
Bread. In German.
I only know that because I learned a little German. Karate bread.
Okay.
That's a strange name. What's the story, Jan? Where did that come from?
Yeah, so basically it's after we tested the RPM crossfading, Zach, Sugar K, he tested it and suddenly his dterm looked like his PIDtoolbox. All the noise was gone because the RPM notches were not ringing anymore. And so this opened up a lot of opportunity to tune all kinds of quads from 3-inch to 7-inch without they all kind of now behaved in a very without much noise. So he developed a racing tune, and in my honor he called it Karate Tune, basically. That's it.
Yeah, that's it.
That's a great story.
But there was also a build, wasn't there? Like there was a build of Betaflight.
Yeah. He shared the build. Yeah, exactly. That was the build when RPM crossfading was very new, and some of Chris Thompson's feed forward smoothing was in there, I think, as well. And he liked it so much that he shared it around with all his racer friends. Yeah.
There's so many guys and a lot of guys in the group that we're talking about. I'd like to give a shout out to lots of people, but I definitely got to mention Steve Evans. Steve is.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Steve has done some amazing stuff. And this is the stuff that's Tell us a little bit. I should. It'd be nice to actually have a good chat with Steven at some point. But
so basically, his scheduler work, he worked 1.5 years on it, I think. Massive stuff. No one can see it while flying, but the RPM filters, for example, are a little bit more precise because of his work on the scheduler, because now the gyro samples come in at exactly the right time. We don't have nearly any jitter in the gyro trace. So the notches, they were jittering a little bit before on 4.2. Now they are spot on target, and now the RPM filter works better just like that, just for free. Yeah.
I mean, I would also throw in my subjective side of it, which is, to me, I definitely think it's smoother as well. Like I think just having the accurate timing in 4.3 just makes, I mean, Jan, you probably know this a lot better than I do, but it's like the timing of the whole code is a very fundamental kind of aspect.
Yeah, and it's very difficult. Yeah, to do it right. Yeah.
So a couple of questions, and I think we'll close this up soon, but there's a couple of questions. Let me see, one by Ethan Mitchell. How do you know the difference between a mechanical issue versus a bad gyro? Anybody want to take it?
Do you want to?
I mean, the thing with the bad gyro, if it's on one axis, it usually it shows up on one axis, and you're going to want to hope that it's roll or pitch, and then you can do a 90-degree rotation. And if the noise swaps and goes to the other axis, so what you do is you take your gyro, turn it, put it back in. You got to go into Betaflight. Don't fly like that. You go into Betaflight, you realign things, and then you go out and fly, and then you get a log file. And
you can see that, yeah, but a bad gyro also is always, it's almost like it couldn't possibly be movement of any sort. Like even
sometimes the trace flicks.
Yeah, it's like
weird,
very jittery. Yeah. If you look at, you have to look at the gyro scales and then see if you can see any kind of totally random movements, because even a mechanical issue is always going to be some sort of waveform, basically, isn't there? Like, but with a gyro that's dodgy, it's just going to send out completely erroneous information.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I was going to say though, if you suspected yaw was bad, you can't do that rotation thing. You're stuck. Anyway, that's that's the only test I know. Next question is by Noisy Boy FPV. Is there a general rule of thumb for Q on increasing larger frames, please? Is there a general rule of thumb for Q on increasingly larger frames? I don't think there's a reason. I mean, Q is just depending upon...
like, yeah, maybe he means like, do you need a wider Q if you've got a bigger frame or something?
Yeah, I don't think in generally speaking, but I mean, sometimes with a bigger prop, you have a bigger footprint of noise, perhaps. But it's all going to be specific to the actual noise profile itself. It's not necessarily
looking at the motor traces. They are extremely narrow, anyways. So very determined. So RPM Q not so much, I wouldn't say, but maybe the dterm, if you have resonance and over a wider range, maybe
he said beast class size. So I haven't looked at a log file
beast
from
class.
A beast class.
I mean, I would say it's worth saying as well, just from the get-go, like, don't try and set your filters. If just do it, you have to take a log and then look at the noise that you've got. Don't try and set it based on some sort of...
We're data-driven people here. We work on
but
data.
The RPM filter, I don't think you need to change it much, the Q value. No.
All right.
Dynamic notch, maybe.
Benny Simonson, will the dynamic notch keep away from a frequency which is covered by RPM filters? So that's an interesting point. Yeah.
Yes, it does. RPM filter comes first, and RPM filter filters out the motor noise, and the dynamic notch only sees what's left. So
what does it do then? I guess it just, if it doesn't see any peak, does it still bounce around looking for whatever is there?
No, it just stays put. If a notch doesn't find anything, it stays put.
Okay, so Go ahead.
Sorry.
Yeah, often, well, if you even if it stays put, at some point it finds a peak and it moves again. So
interesting.
Can you crossfade it out? If it's just chilling, can you just crossfade it out and then fade it back in?
That's what I want. Yeah, that's what I want to do for Betaflight 4.4 actually. Yeah.
Awesome. That's cool. So then, but my thought is, so if you set, say, 4 dynamic notches, will they all necessarily be active, or would they just only if something appears?
Right now, they are always active. Yeah.
Okay.
So, I mean, just choose as many as you need, but not more.
I see.
But even if you set 4 or 5, they all, at some point, you will find 5 peaks, and they will all move accordingly. But if you don't have enough vibration, which is good, then just don't use as many.
Well, we are close to the end of the third Zoom. It's going to cut us off. So what do you think, guys? I think that was pretty good.
Quickly, there's another question. What do you think of Rosser's filter tuning method? I think it's pretty good.
Yeah.
Period. Yeah, it's pretty good. I mean, I'm not much of a racer myself, more of a freestyling pilot, and I think it's good. Yeah. I mean, I would tune my filters in a similar way. So, but yeah. Sorry, I didn't want to cut you off.
That's good. No problem. So, boys, I guess that's it. Thank you again for agreeing to do this. Blast. A lot of fun. We still have some people hanging out, but I think that's about all I got in the tank.
Thanks for having us. Yeah.
Cool. Sounds good. Yeah. Thanks for having us. Good chat.
Okay. See you guys.
Okay.